A new CBS News poll finds a growing number of American voters don't think President Biden should be running after that debate in Atlanta with former President Trump. 72% of registered voters in our CBS News poll say the president does not have, in their view, the mental and cognitive health to serve. That's up by 7 points compared to the time before the debate. Joining us now is Anthony Salvanto and Weijia Jiang. Weijia's at the White House. Anthony here at the table. He is CBS News' Executive Director of Elections and Surveys. Weijia, our senior White House correspondent. Weijia, let's begin with you for a moment, though. I want to play something from one of the president's key allies, Congressman James Clyburn of South Carolina.
The people who looked at those answers from both came to the conclusion that on substance, Joe Biden was the winner far and away. But people looking at television, not paying much attention to anything else but how they look, will go with style. And Joe Biden has never been a show horse. He's always been a workhorse. Just the opposite is true with his opponent. Nothing but show, no substance.
Weijia, such a really important political moment for President Biden. I think back to 2020 when Congressman Clyburn said, I know Joe, Joe knows us. He helped make the Biden presidency happen. Inside the White House today, when you're talking to people familiar with the president and his top advisors, are they looking to Congressman Clyburn's comments and feeling heartened that the key leaders in the Democratic Party are still behind them in a forceful way? Or are they skittish and nervous about the latest polling numbers?
They are trying to brush off the latest numbers, Robert. And sure, they keep pointing to the fact that those who really know Biden know that what the American public saw on Thursday, they argue, is not the Biden that serves here at the White House every day. They're trying to make the case that this was simply a bad night. And in that interview with Clyburn, he actually goes on to say that he is aware of what information overload is like. And in this case, he believes it was preparation overload. And I have talked to some staffers inside of the White House who also echoed that, saying that they think the reason Biden performed the way he did was because there was too much emphasis on pumping him up with facts and figures rather than letting him be Joe Biden and come out and talk about his anecdotes, talk about his decades of experience as a lawmaker. And so they are trying to turn the page, Robert, and say that this was just a one-off for President Biden. There's nothing to see here. But of course, the problem is that the American public saw what they saw, and they want answers about why it was such a bad night. And that is something that the White House and the campaign has not been able to answer. They initially said that he had a raspy voice because he had a cold. But what about the freezing? What about the not being able to articulate his thoughts? What about not being able to fact-check Donald Trump in real time, as he had prepared to do? And so there are still many outstanding questions here, Robert. But the bottom line, I would say, is that sources want people to take away that he is not going anywhere. He has no plans to drop out of the race, no plans to change his campaign cadence. And he is here serving as president. In fact, he's on his way back from Camp David to the White House.
We just stick with us. Anthony, we just heard your polling. Everyone was talking about it over the weekend. CBS News shows there is concern about President Biden. But as a political analyst and as a pollster, help us understand what is the real impact on the race, if any. If voters have concerns about age based on your work, does that override other concerns they might have, like about former President Trump's conduct or about the economy or immigration? Does this issue kind of hover over the whole Biden campaign and whether voters will back him or not? Or is it more just of a side issue that's tangential to the real drivers of this race?
Well, it's been hovering. So the numbers you read at the top, that drop after the debate, the fact is we've been measuring which candidate does either candidate have the mental and cognitive health to serve for months. And it was always relatively low for President Biden. It was in the 30s, mid-low 30s. And then it goes down after the debate. And what I think that tells you is, for a lot of the public, it was kind of confirming a suspicion that they held. And in that regard, it seems like something that would be more durable and lasting in that regard, or maybe at least harder to turn around. The second part, Bob, to your question, is it is related to whether or not they think he ought to be running, and particularly for Democrats. When they say, and it's almost half the party that now says that he ought not be the nominee, it's related to their view that he doesn't have the mental and cognitive health to serve. And there's a strategic component to that. It's because they don't think he can campaign effectively.
With all that said, quickly, Anthony, if you were talking to a Democrat and they said, Anthony Salvanto, I need a credible, nonpartisan polling assessment. Is President Biden still competitive in this race, despite everything that happened at the debate?
Give it a couple of days. And the reason I say that as a pollster is that people watch the debate. Now they've gone and they've talked to their friends and they've seen the coverage and they've seen the Biden surrogates out there making their case. Let them take in all of that information, which is how people process big, important things like this, and then start to see polling maybe this week, maybe into next week or after the holiday, after they go home and talk about it at the barbecues. That's when you start to see something that might be more durable as a change or not a change in the race.
And Weijia, real quick, what do we expect from the president in the coming days?
Robert, I'm sorry to be checking my phone, but I'm just getting some new information from campaign advisors who are pointing to a new internal poll from the Biden camp. And they say, according to these numbers, and they looked at 7 key battleground states, they are claiming that the president's numbers going head-to-head with Donald Trump have been unchanged as a result of the debate. They are claiming that age was already baked in, and people already knew that the president was old as they were going into the debate. And so they think that after they watched him, they came away with the idea that, yes, he is old and he struggles sometimes, as any grandparent would, to gather their thoughts. But they claim that they are not worried about the CBS News poll and others, and in fact claim that, you know, in the coming weeks, other public polls will match what they are seeing internally. As for the president, he has a very robust schedule coming up. He is hosting the NATO summit here in Washington, D.C. in just about a week. And of course, you know, the White House says every day to us that he has to serve as president. And so we expect to see him in the coming days. Of course, we don't know exactly what more they might add with regard to his schedule, because, again, they really want to push back, Robert, and make the point that he is here.
Great fresh reporting from Weijia Jiang at the White House. We always appreciate it. Wow, it shows the Biden people, they're digging in, pushing back against the critics, and respectfully pushing back against the pollsters, clearly. I know you have to deal with that from time to time, Anthony.
It's an election year.
It is.
That's what happens.
Anthony has to have thick skin. Anthony Salvanto and Weijia Jiang, thanks again. And a quick programming note, join Anthony for a special Independence Day edition of America Decides. Anthony and our CBS Reports documentary team went out into the field to talk to voters behind the polls. His half-hour documentary is followed by an America Decides panel about the election in November. That airs this Thursday, July 4th at 5 p.m. Eastern.